Hi there and welcome to this video. As we come towards the end of 2019, I thought it was worth looking back through 2019 and seeing what's been going on around the Nikon and mirrorless camera market. It's very easy to feel that time is racing by, but a year is still a long time, and when you look back to the beginning of the year, there are things that you kind of feel are a lot further back in the past than they are. So the Nikon Z6 and Z7 were launched in mid-2018 with the 24-7 f4 lens and the 35mm and 50mm f1.8 lenses. However, it was closer to the end of 2018 before there was really stable quantity supply into the markets of those cameras and lenses. But 2019 has been a year when more mainstream use of the Z series cameras and lenses has really picked up. It's been a competitive market. If we look back to 2018, we had Canon launching their EOS R late in 2018, but 2019 has been a fairly quiet year for them in terms of camera bodies. Sony have released their A7R Mark IV in 2019, and that's a regular drumbeat for them of, sort of every 1 to 2 years of upgrading their A7R range. Fuji launched the X-T3 back in 2018, but 2019 has again been a relatively quiet year for them. And then Panasonic launched their S1 camera back at the beginning of 2019. So in general, 2019 has been relatively quiet with regards to the launch of camera bodies. However, with the flurry of activity late in 2018, this isn't surprising, and 2019 has been about the different camera manufacturers vying for market share to a large extent. And 2019 has been about the build out of their ranges. So if we focus back in on Nikon, we obviously had the 24-70 f2.8 launched earlier in the year. We had the 14 to 30mm f4 lens launched. Since then we've had the 24mm f1.8, the 85mm f1.8, and of course the rather large and rather impressive Noct lens, which is a fairly niche lens and probably is a totally different category. However, we haven't had the expected 70 to 200 f2.8 Z mount lens, and that will probably slip into 2020 now. As you'll know from previous videos, I've picked up a couple of the lenses I've just mentioned, the 24-70 f2.8 and the 14 to 30 f4. If we start with the 24-70 f2.8, this was always my go-to lens in the f-mount version, and I wasn't anticipating upgrading. I bought the Z7 with the 24-70 f4. However, I found that when I was doing quite a lot of these kind of videos, the difference between the Z mount lens and the F mount lens was largely about the noise and the speed of focus. I therefore had an opportunity to transition from the F mount lens to the Z mount lens at an attractive price, and I took that opportunity and I haven't really looked back. The F mount was my go-to lens, and the Z series 24-70 f2.8 is also a go-to lens for me. However, I have kept my f4 24-70 because there are occasions where when I'm traveling somewhere where I know the light is going to be good, I'm not going to need the f2.8, I can take a much lighter, much more compact kit with me without too much of a trade-off in quality between the lenses. So I've kept both the f4 and the f2.8, and they work in my situation very well. The 14 to 30 I bought as a replacement for my 16 to 35mm f4 f-mount lens, and I have to say I haven't used it as much as I thought, but it's not for the reasons that I'd anticipated. It's not because I haven't taken panoramas, because as you'll have seen in some of my previous videos, there are quite a few panoramas. What I'm finding is one of the challenges with the Z series, as with other mirrorless cameras, is the challenge of dust. And I've tried to now consciously reduce the number of lens changes I do when I'm out in the field, because I was finding that I was having to either do some cleaning in the field or cleaning of dust spots in post-production more readily more often with the mirrorless than with my previous D850. So I'm challenging myself to reduce that risk by not changing the lenses as much, and therefore if I'm looking to take a panorama, what I'm finding is actually I can use a 24-70 down at the 24 end, and I can take multiple exposures, and with the new capabilities in Lightroom, which are really good for stitching together photos, I can create much bigger panoramas, and therefore I'm perhaps adapting the way I use kit to blend a different way of approaching it. And that's really meant that the 14-30 hasn't travelled with me, because it doesn't have quite the fit of a 24-70 for other types of shooting when I'm looking to go out to the sort of 70mm end of the 24-70. That said, it's a great lens. I've still got it, I still do use it, but it has to be a certain use case where I know I'm going to be using it for me to take it with me. The other piece of kit that we've seen released for the Z series, the Z6 and Z7, particularly in 2019, is the MB-N10 grip. Now, there was a bit of speculation before it was launched about whether it would have a shutter release button on it or whether it would be purely a battery grip, and sadly, it has come out as just a battery grip. It doesn't have a shutter release button on it. Now, I last had a battery grip for my D200, and I found it really useful because it had that vertical shutter release button on it, and that was probably as or possibly even more useful than the additional battery capacity. The MB-N10 grip doesn't have that. However, it does have the capability where you can change one battery out while still shooting. So if you're doing time lapses where you're out in the field and the camera is actually shooting whilst you're changing the batteries, that functionality could be useful. However, it's quite a niche functionality. So at £179 here in the UK, it's going to have a limited appeal. As I said earlier, the mirrorless camera market in 2019 has been fairly competitive, with the likes of Nikon and Canon with their first generation of mirrorless cameras really trying to define where they sit in the market and carve out market share. The result of this is that here in the UK we've seen the price of the Z6 and Z7 drop by about 30% this year, making it quite an attractive price now. However, the big launch this year for Nikon was probably the Z50, which was their first foray into crop sensor aps-c mirrorless cameras. They launched it with a 16-50 f3.5 to 6.3 lens, which is the equivalent obviously of a 24-70, and a 50-250 mm f4.5 to 6.3 lens. So a really attractive set of kit, and here in the UK at the moment I've seen it for just sub £1,000, so a pretty attractive price point for a pretty good set of kit there. But it was launched fairly late in the year, so it'll be interesting to see how the market for the crop sensor aps-c cameras develops as we move into 2020. Obviously with the mirrorless system, actually it's more than just the camera and the lenses. It's about the ecosystem. And that's where there are some real opportunities, and we've seen some really interesting innovation in 2019. There are two main things that are really helping redefine the ecosystem. Firstly, the size and weight of mirrorless cameras versus DSLRs. And this has an impact on things like bags and tripods. And then there's the hybrid nature of the Z series cameras, with video shooting as easy to do as stills photography. And this is having an impact and driving a market in gimbals, in mics, which really allow you to take video production to that next level. As an example of the innovation, as I've spoken before, I find the Rode Wireless Go mic a really great combination of size, performance and price. And it's this kind of miniaturization without compromise that has started in 2019 but has a way to go. It'd be remiss of me to finish this video without talking about the software we use for post-production. And what we're seeing here is the rise of artificial intelligence within the post-processing area. That's either to automate tasks, perhaps the tagging of photos or the creation and stitching together of multiple images into panoramas. Or it's used in the creation space, and what we're seeing is improved smart healing, such as in Photoshop, which is now really quite sophisticated, and perhaps even in Lightroom, where it's being used to fill in the uneven edges of panoramas. I think what we'll see is a continued update here. For example, Lightroom in 2019 has had 5 updates, which included things like texture sliders, which are great for not only sharpening images, but also softening images such as faces in portraits. We're also seeing the rise of mobile platforms. So really Adobe starting to think about how do they develop their Photoshop products onto the iPad. We're also seeing the latest iOS expanding out to allow a file structure for the first time, which is really useful for us as photographers and videographers. So when we marry up the increasing power of software with the increasing functionality of the mirrorless cameras that are available, we're seeing some real opportunities to change the way we perhaps approach digital photography and digital video capture. When I look back over 2019, I don't think there have been any massive big bang moments like there were in 2018 with the excitement around the launch of some of the new mirrorless cameras. However, we have stepped forward, but it's come from many small steps, and many small steps in combination to allow us the ability to perhaps, as I say, approach our digital imaging in a slightly different way. And I think this puts us on a trajectory that will make 2020 really interesting. I hope you've enjoyed all the videos I've produced throughout 2019. It's been a great journey to be on with you. I do hope you've enjoyed them. If you do, make sure you hit subscribe. It does keep the channel moving forward. Hit the notification bell and you'll be notified of future videos. I've got some interesting ones planned for 2020, and I look forward to seeing you in a future video.